guys, this is Svetlana from Comic Cosplay, and today I'm going to show you how I made my Demonic Brigitte shield. As you know, I'm working on my Demonic Brigitte now for quite a while. This costume is actually a mashup between Overwatch and Diablo and was designed by the amazing Zach Fisher. I already showed you in the past how I made the flail as well as how I made the main part of the armor, but now, since I finally finished the shield, it's time for a new making of video. As you can see, this little cutie here lights up since I actually built in over 550 individual LEDs. I also made it completely out of EVA foam, so it's really lightweight, and to make it even more spooky and scary, it also includes a really cool smoke effect. I'm going to show you how I made this whole shield in the next few minutes, but if you want to get into cosplay and crafting as well, check out my cosplay crafting books on kamocosplay.com. For example, I have one that shows you how to work with EVA foam and make cool props, and also one how to work with animated LEDs like you see in this video in my animated lights book. And now let's start with the video.
First, the reference. For the base, I used a line art of the illustration, isolated half of the shield, scaled it up and printed it out in real life size. Then I taped all pages together and cut out the shape. I wasn't really sure about the size though, so I printed out two more size variations. The largest one was a little bit too massive, the middle one looked fine, and the small one was too baby. So I went with the middle one and grabbed some 10mm EVA foam to trace the shape onto the material. I cut it out with a freshly sharpened box cutter, mirrored the shape for the other half, and even made a second extra layer. So 4 pieces in total. I will show you why in just a second. Afterwards, I covered the middle line with contact cement and carefully connected the left and right side. As you can see, the curve in the middle gave the shield a nice curve as well. Then I covered the inner side with more glue and attached the second foam layer this way. I actually cut this part out a little bit bigger and rougher, so I had to get rid of the excess material next. Connecting 2 layers made the shield less wobbly and just a lot more sturdy. For the next step, I had to cut out these windows and trace the resulting shape onto my foam shield. These were the areas I wanted to light up. Next, I had to solder a good amount of LED strips. I carefully placed some glue on their backs and attached them strip by strip all over the shield. The step took me a while. For the power supply, I cut a hole into the foam and pulled the wires to the inside of the shield. In total, I had 540 LEDs, which are around 9 meters of LED strip. To control and light them up, I used an Adafruit trinket and a LiPo battery. I used this circuit and code setup actually in all my props and costumes, so I might do a separate video tutorial for it later. As you can see though, the circuit worked, all the LEDs lit up and the test was a success. Next, I placed another layer of foam and kept the LED windows free. These were filled then with plaster sote, which is also called LED foam. This material is absolutely amazing to diffuse lights, so I even used a double layer here. Following that, I made another window foam piece, but curved the edges this time with the box cutter and sanded them nice and smooth with my Dremel. Next, I carefully glued this on as well, and then began working out the final look of the shield. Yes, these were actually all foam layers so far. In total, the shield is 4 cm thick. To smooth out the rough cuts, I used the sanding bit of my Dremel. This step was super dusty, so I used my protective gear as you can see. Now to the details. To achieve the stained glass look, I used beveled foam strips, which I just glued on piece by piece. I got these as well as all other foam and my contact cement from Cosplay Shop BE. Just check out the shop list on my website if you're looking for places to buy materials. The lines in between the bevels were just 2mm strips, which I placed with superglue. So far so good. Next, I applied water onto the shield's edge and spread foam clay all over it. This material is just amazing for sculpting work and really easy to work with. So this was the result once the clay dried out. Afterwards, I used sanding paper to smooth out the transitions and used my Dremel for additional details. Since sanding foam clay is crazy dusty, I worked over my vacuum hose the whole time. Now that the base of my shield was done, it was time to start with the Diablo head. Since building it from scratch would be super hard though, I needed a reference. After some research, my husband Benny found a really cool 3D model on cgtrader.com. The artist's name is Zero Swat, but I'm also gonna put a link in the video description. After opening the head in Blender, Benny used a technique called retopology to make a low poly version of it. This would make it a lot easier to turn it into a foam pattern. Go check out our video on this technique by clicking on the info icon. To get a general idea of how large the head needed to be, Benny made a screenshot and printed it out so I could test it on my shield. Looked actually quite okay. So next, Benny imported the model into Papakura Designer and turned it into a paper pattern. He then cut out every single piece, taped it together, and slowly built a cute paper Diablo dummy for me. This step took him quite a while, but I thought it was probably the best way to sculpt this head. So this was the final result. Looked already pretty awesome, right? I was super excited to trace this onto foam next. I marked my main cutting lines with a marker, separated the head along these marks again, and got a nice pattern this way. Following that, I began tracing everything piece by piece onto 5mm EVA foam. Then I cut everything out, applied glue onto the edges, connected them carefully, and slowly built up my Diablo head. As you can see, I cut some edges at an angle, so I could build up dips and traces. This way the head slowly got its shape. I also had to do each step twice, so I got a left and right side. And then I noticed that the whole head was actually too large and didn't fit onto the shield. Crap! The reason for this was actually that I placed the printed out screenshot around the shield, which resulted into a warped impression of the size. So back to the 3D model again. Benny used the sculpting tools in Blender to completely reshape the model, and to make really sure that it worked this time, he also mounted the Diablo head on a simple shield model and only then printed out the pattern again. So, back to starting all over again. Yeah, this part was super exciting. Tracing, cutting and gluing everything again. However, it already looked a lot more promising. So finally I closed the back and the left and right side were then done. Now I only had to connect them both super carefully. What, this step made me really nervous. The last part was only the jaw, which consisted out of a few last foam parts. Wow, I was so happy to finally finish this monster. It was actually the most difficult Papakura model we've ever done. But look at it, isn't it cute? And the best was, it fit perfectly onto the shield this time. So now it was time to add some texture. For this step I worked again with foam clay. I'm really not good at sculpting, but foam clay is very forgiving and easy to handle. So I carefully added a lot of individual scales, made some raised up veins, and even placed some cute teeth. As you can see, the difference is quite striking. To apply foam clay, I only had to cover the surface with a little bit of water and spread the material directly onto the foam. This way I applied scale after scale and covered the whole head with a really organic and authentic texture. Absolutely love how the result turned out. Now I only had to add some clay onto the jaw as well, add some spikes and teeth, place some more foam sausages here and there, and done! So cute! For this job I used almost a whole bucket of foam clay. This is all that was left over. To add some additional texture, I used my Dremel and placed tiny holes all over the scales. And also did some lines, as you can see. The result looked much more interesting now. Next, I only had to do some slight adjustments on the jaw and the back of the foam build so that my Diablo head fit perfectly onto the shield. Next up was priming. As always, I used Flex Bond and applied 2 thick layers with a large flat brush. Afterwards, I grabbed this artist gel and dabbed it generously onto the corners of each scale. This gave the surface a much more natural and organic look and would make the paint job just pop a lot more. Following this, I also covered the shield with several layers of Flex Bond. For the attachment, I simply glued on a strip of foam to the inside and a round pipe next to it. Wrong position. Let's get rid of it and try it again. Contact cement wasn't strong enough here though, so I also added a lot of hot glue to make sure nothing would get loose. Yes, this looked much better. Next part was painting. So Benny painted the base of the stained glass parts. He applied first some yellow and then some orange. As you can see, it gets darker around the edges. He also did the honeycomb pattern because my hands are simply too shaky for that. Finally, he even added a third little darker layer around the outer corners. Then it was my turn to brush on the honeycomb lines. Gosh, this literally took forever. But I was really happy with the result. Then the foam bubbles got some dark brown. And here's a light test. As you can see, the LEDs still shone through all the layers of foam, primer and paint. Okay, the next step was to seal the paint job with satin spray varnish and cover up the orange honeycomb areas. I used Nitto masking tape for the edges and this yellow masking tape from Tesa for the larger areas. Ready for more paint! Now that the orange areas were covered, I could apply color to the rest of the shield. I sprayed on shadows into the corners and the Dremeled in carvings. Afterwards, I added another layer of protective spray varnish and grabbed some oil paint for more highlights. These paints were roughly brushed on and then wiped away with a paper towel and brush cleaner. Finally, I carefully got rid of the tape again and sealed the whole paint job with even more spray varnish. The Diablo skull got pretty much the same treatment. I applied some brown as a base first. As you can see here, the hat barely fit into my spray booth though. Then I added shadows with a darker shade in the corners and simply tried to give the paint job more depth. Then, yes, sealing! Looks already much better, right? Now to the oil washing. Again, I just began covering parts of the head with dark brown and wiped most of the paint off afterwards. The leftover paint stuck nicely in the corners of the texture I applied before, and as you can see, the result looked pretty organic and realistic. Then I added some additional paint for darker spots and brushed on some brighter acrylic paint for the edges of the scales. So happy how the result looked like. So, last but not least, some spray varnish. To light up the eyes and mouth, I soldered some additional LED strips, covered a piece of translucent foam with a thin layer of paint and glued them then onto the back. This part would light up the jaw that was already painted as well. Just had to place the LED foam with some contact cement into it. I also did pretty much the same with the eyes. Some LED strips behind a layer of translucent foam and a little bit of soldering here and there. Next, I grabbed one of my old smoke machines from a previous video tutorial, attached a longer silicone tube to it, and hot glued it into the skull. Now my Diablo head not only lit up, but even got a spooky smoke effect. Yes, this looked good enough. To connect head and shield, I cut a hole into the middle next. I just had to get through all of these foam layers first. Then I pulled the tube as well as the wires through the hole and loosely mounted the demon head onto the shield. To secure it properly, I basically just used a good amount of hot glue. Zelda and Midna totally didn't get why I was sitting on the floor, but I had no free hands to cuddle them. Later, I just fixed the head with some tape, so I got my hands free again. Well, and last but not least, I made a little foam box which I placed onto the back of the shield and threw in all the wires, electronics, batteries and the smoke machine. Super professional, right? But hey, it did the job. Well, and this was my final Demonic Brigitte shield. Here is the plain paint job, but as you know, I also added plenty of LEDs. So I made a static red mode, which I also can turn to orange. In addition, I included a pulsing animation, which is sadly a little bit difficult to see here. And a crawling effect, which is my favorite one. I'm really happy with the diffusion of the LEDs and the light animation. The smoke effect is also a nice extra, and overall I think the design in general is pretty cute. As you might have noticed though, I didn't add any of the spikes around the shield. They would have made storage and transportation just so much more difficult. Still, I hope you like the result as much as I do.
I really hope you liked this video and thanks so much for watching, but I'm pretty sure you still have plenty of questions. So if you're curious on how to make a smoke machine, I made a tutorial already about that, as well as a basic animated LED programming and how to solder the circuit I'm working with. But like the circuit I have right now and also the code I have right now allows me to switch between 4 different animations and modes, and I think that's pretty cool. So if you want to see a tutorial about that as well, let me know in the comments, and also if you have any other questions. So if you like this video and enjoy our work, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. And in addition, you can support us on Patreon. And until then, see you in the next video. See you very soon. Bye bye.